it's important to see how Calgary's growing. And of course, this is going to lead to a conversation, I think. Is Bragg Creek destined to become a suburb in Calgary at some point? So let's think about that. There's Calgary, about 722 square kilometers as of last week. And here we get to see the population and how it's grown historically. All of that data is empirical to the left and projected into the future. My eyes aren't so good, so I'll wander over here. But it basically says if we could come back here in 2070, we should have about 3.5 million people living in Calgary. So is Bragg Creek destined to become part of the sprawl? Calgary had a footprint of 93 square kilometers in 1951. Some of the people in this room were alive. I was almost alive back then. By 2007, it had grown to 580 square kilometers. We used a very simplistic model and said, if Calgary continues to grow the way it did and continues to grow in population, I think we had it at 2.5%, by 2057, basically in about 25 years, it would be almost 2,000 square kilometers. Now, fortunately, in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a fair bit of conversation, I think largely led by Nenshi in Calgary, about the downside of sprawl and the need to grow up more than grow out. So Calgary is starting to densify. But again, if you measure it right now, it's 722 square kilometers in 2024. So it continues to grow, but it's beginning to densify, which is great. And we really need to push that for many, many reasons, in terms of all the ecological goods and services. But as Calgary grows, every day, and particularly on weekends, it's sending its people out for recreation. And not all of them, but many of them head west, heading to Banff, heading to Bragg Creek. And that land use has grown significantly. And I think that growth trajectory has just started. I think the average Calgarian doesn't even know about West Bragg Creek yet. So we've got this amazing infrastructure, network of trails. They've been rebuilt to try and follow some better rules in terms of topography. And people are coming out to use it, which in many ways is great. People need recreation. And this happens to be the closest access to Kananaskis for Calgary. And thanks to Eric Lloyd, we've got some data. So I plotted the historical data. Eric gave me some data back to 2007 a few days ago. And this is the stunning part right here. The exponent that best fits the historical data is 12.5% a year. Can you imagine if any of us were assured of getting 12.5% a year on our investments? I can't even run 12.5% because the numbers are obscene. But if you run, and these numbers are number of vehicles entering into the parking lot. But if you run 3%, 5%, and 7%, by 2050, we'll have about 220,000 vehicles per year. In the lowest case scenario, probably much more likely to have around 630,000. Now, if we convert vehicles into person days, the people that are actually out there, we're sitting at right now about 220, and that will grow to somewhere between 500,000 and 1.3 million. So that's a pretty major change. And that is based on a Calgarian growth rate that is way slower than what this current provincial government wants to see. Okay, so